Hello, everyone. Today, I kind of want to go over market structure and kind of how to identify what the best trades are going to be to take as far as risk to reward goes. So, this kind of plays a big role in how I personally find trades, especially, the intraday swings that I'll be taking on NASDAQ. And so, what I mean by market structure is obviously, I'm sure a lot of you know a bit about market structure, but you just don't necessarily think to apply it every single time. So, market structure is just the way the market's trending, right? So, we can either have, an uptrend, higher highs, higher lows, or the opposite, right? We're making, obviously, that's a very bad chart, but anyways, something like this, right? Where we're making lower highs, lower lows, right, and a downtrend, and then same goes for the uptrend, right? We're making um, higher lows, higher highs, right? Oops. And then obviously, there's the consolidation, right, where we're just kind of ranging, right? It may seem like, it may do a higher high or a lower low at some points, right? But in the essence, those are just going to be traps, right? Until there's actually a move outside of that trend, or sorry, outside of that level of consolidation. Now, the way that I would trade this, we'll just go over the consolidation kind of structure for right now because it's kind of it's pretty simple to identify once you see it. But so let's say we're in a, we're just very much trending, right? If you were going to take this to the downside, right? How I said earlier that it does, bear traps a lot, right? You don't want to long or you don't want to go short right here, right? Because it could have short trapped you down here and then it goes to move higher, right? Same on the other side, right? You don't want to buy just to get faked out on the trap, right? So you want to wait for a break and retest for the confirmation. Now, that is, something that I do trade is break and retests. So what that might be, right, is so we'll have the bottom of the range, the top of the range, right? If you're looking to go short or long on this, right? So for example, if we want to go short on this, right, we want to see a break, but we want to see it kind of retest the area for the move higher, right? Because that's going to help us avoid the trap, right? Same thing going on the upside, right? Let me just extend this a bit, but we're gonna have, you want to see it go up, right, and then retest right here, right, and then for the push higher. That's also going to be the best risk to reward, right? You don't want to be buying at the bottom of the range, right, hoping that it goes up, and then vice versa. You don't want to be shorting at the top of the range, hoping it goes down, right? Because this chop right here, there's just not a good risk to reward, right? Whereas if let me use kind of go up here, right? But waiting for that confirmation, really, for the retest for the move higher, right? We can buy as this is moving up, right? Have our stops down here or even down here, right? And then, if it's right here, you can just target a 2 to 1, 3 to 1, right? Something like this, right? But if you have your stop down here, right, that's going to give you a lot more room, right? You're going to have room, stop just under the range. I mean, you can go all the way up here, right? And you're still going to have a good risk to reward, right? It might take a little bit longer, but you're really letting the trade play for itself, right? So that was a bit longer. Apologies, but now going back towards the market structure, right? This is where it gets kind of tricky at times because looking at a 4 hour chart, right? Um, Overall, it is kind of in a consolidation period, right? We did have the brief move above that almost looked like a trap, right? We're just testing this kind of neckline, so to speak, right now and breaking out of it. But again, it was a very low volume week, right? So we're kind of taking it with a grain of salt, but overall, right, we were in a downtrend, right? Making higher highs, higher lows, and that's kind of how I base my trades, right? So I was only looking to short the last few weeks because every single move higher was getting sold off aggressively, right? And that's always going to give you the best risk to reward when you're trading with the structure of the market, right? So, um, it's when markets are just going up, it's like trying to buy, or it's like trying to short the top, right? Obviously, it's really hard to short a top when the markets are just steadily trending, right? And the same thing goes with a lower, or sorry, with a bearish market, sentiment. right? You don't want to try buying the bottom because although it might seem easier when overall the markets always go up, right? We're taking intraday trades, couple day swings, right? We don't want to be in hundreds of points of drawdown, right? So that's why I've been looking at, right here. This was a perfect example of the consolidation, right? Right, it had the trap up here, and then we were kind of just ranging in this level, right? I waited for the break, and then I got it on this retest right here, right? And then same thing, right? Just retesting. And then, so as the markets are turning down, right, you can wait for this, wait for the retests. You can try and you can still short the top, right? Because the market is trending down, right? So we did have this bear trap, right? We ended up getting entry in here a few weeks ago. Um, we had this kind of head and shoulders, right? And then there was a little retest down here, right? This isn't always going to work out, but this will increase your win rate and your risk to reward because you're trading what the market is showing you, right? When you're intraday, if you're zoomed in this much, right? Or let's go back here, right? We're zoomed in this much, right? You can see it looks like a range overall, right? You're just trying to, you know, buy anywhere, sell anywhere, right? It's not super clear, but that's why I'm really trying to start getting you guys to zoom out on the overall time frame, higher time frames and look. And we'll even go on a different chart for an example. So if we go over here to swings, we'll go to UPST here, right? Now, it's kind of harder whenever you're trying to trade reversals, right? This is consolidation, right? This is just us buying near the bottom of the range, right? And then although you might say, it never broke this low here or this low here, there was a trap inside, right? We had this wedge, and if we go on the weekly, right, look at that beautiful weekly close right there. It swept it right here, as well as sweeping some daily lows, right? So we got in there. So that was our upstart swing. But even if we go to, um, I'm trying to think of like a good example here. Or app, for example, right? This was one that I posted in the free alerts today. Okay, so if we go on the weekly, right, it's clearly in a very bullish uptrend, right? Every single dip is getting soaked, right? Let me go up my draw tool, right? We have the higher low, sorry, the higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, right? Now let's go to a 4 hour chart, right? Or even like a 30 minute, right? This is kind of looking like it's in a, it's bearish, right? Every single pop is getting sold, right? But that's where, you have to go to the higher time frame. You have to say, okay, the higher time frames, right? We're in a um bullish structure, right? So we don't want to be trying to short, right? Obviously, sometimes the shorts will play nice, but the best risk to reward is going to be taking those longs, right? Obviously, I wish I would have gotten in sooner to this trade, um, right, somewhere down here, right? But that's not always going to happen. But that's why we're going to wait kind of for a pullback if possible. Even if we had a pullback down here, right? We have this area of liquidity here. This is a swing low, right? So we can have our stop down here, and then our target, we can target all-time highs or even the next psychological level, right? That next psychological level being, 750 or even 800, right? So it's always going to give us a good risk to reward. But this is kind of how I trade options as well. I'm going to go more over options later, but really just pay attention to the market structure, see the way market is trending, and always trade with the trend, right? I know that can be a little confusing sometimes because the lower time frames aren't always aligning with the higher time frames, but always stick to the higher time frames because that's going to always kind of it's always going to show you um, what the best setup is going to be overall, whether that's going to be a long setup or a short setup. So um, even going back to traps, right? Obviously, I'm about to end this, but right, we had this level right here, bear trap right here, bear trap right here, fuel higher, right? So that's all it is, just really making sure we're going on the higher time frames, watching, how structure is, kind of waiting for the lower time frame, higher time frame structure to align, and then finding our setups within, right? It sounds like a lot, but this is going to ultimately help you increase your win rate. It's going to help you increase your risk to reward, and it's just going to make trading a lot less stressful when you're letting the setups come to you.